Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Master Runeterra Squadcast. We've got some familiar faces and some more familiar faces today. You guys might remember Eni from last week, and Ptash, who's joined us in the past, is once again back on the desk. And maybe if we're a little bit lucky, we might get one or two more surprise guests later on in the show. Unlikely, but we're going to keep our fingers crossed and pray a little bit. Eni, what do you got there, bro?
You just grab.
I love me some mayonnaise.
Don't do this.
Mayonnaise is so great.
You don't have to do this. Anyway,
Mayonnaise is so good. Yeah, I love me some mayonnaise.
Down there.
I got instantly outclassed. This is rough.
That was hard. It was really hard to get it. I'm like right next to my fridge.
It's
like some Indiana Jones stuff.
No, he seemed okay with
what do you mean?
Yeah, he seemed okay with that.
It's a bit salty. It's a bit salty, but yeah, no, it's good.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, before we started our show, we were actually having a rather interesting discussion about what motivates ourselves as competitive players, and also if we would give up everything to go to LA and be a game dev. So where we left off right before we brought ourselves into this show was we were discussing, I was personally saying that I myself don't compete for the sake of the competition. I compete to integrate myself with the community. I compete to better myself at the game because I personally have a fear of being bad at things and like I need to be good if I'm doing something. And I compete because I want to help other people learn and improve. And I feel like you can't do that unless you're learning and improving it yourself. And competition is the best way to push you forward in that journey. I think Ptash was ready to say something before I cut us in. If you want to start us off beyond what I've already gone.
Yeah, I was just saying that there are specific players, I think, where being the best pilot on a specific archetype is what drives them. Or in general, having like a wide breadth of archetypes that they can pilot better than the average player. And at least for me personally, I've never seen myself as a pilot first. I got on this journey for self-improvement, and just the competition was fun, especially during the peak of COVID. But now it's just like seeing how far I can push myself as a player. But I don't know if I ever have thought of myself as a pilot first. And I'm curious if you guys do see yourselves that way, or you see yourselves as, you know, trying to innovate the meta, pushing the meta forward as a deck builder, or a bunch of other different ways in which you add value to the community at large, or see yourself fitting into the community at large.
Yeah, I like pretty much like I didn't even like this is the first card game I've like ever actually played competitively. Mostly I was like priced out of other ones. Like tried playing MTG Arena, that's not worth it. Tried playing like Hearthstone, and I managed to do that for like quite a while, but never like I just didn't really vibe with Hearthstone as much, and I wouldn't say I like tried to be particularly competitive until I top cut the first time, and then I was suddenly like had this like into a bunch of like communities and got to like start talking with a bunch of people, and it just became like a group of friends, and like we've like hung out in real life. Like I've been to Monty's house. And then like I just like kind of kept top cutting and was like, okay, so like I can do this. And now I'm in this spot where like I don't care too much about like getting a first place or anything. Like getting like a top 8's really impressive, and that's good enough for me right now. Like I'm set to compete in Worlds, so I kind of started streaming and was like, I want to do more for the community, and I'm gonna like make YouTube content with some coming soon with Monty, and start like Twitch streaming. And it's been like super fun to just talk with these people who like have been part of the community, but I haven't really spoken to a lot. So I definitely see myself more as just like trying to be a positive force in the community rather than someone like trying really, really hard to be the best. Like I have no intention of hitting rank 1 again unless it happens. I've done it once ever in the history of the game. As for moving to LA though, if you need card designers, Ruben, I'll move to LA. I will. I will,
That's not what he was saying before we started.
but I will. I will put a portfolio together so goddamn quickly. You just like DM me and I'll get back to you in like 2 days.
That's a long time to leave a man on red.
No. I respond, but I'll get back with an actual portfolio. I'm not prepped and ready
He
to go
has the
yet.
full portfolio, resume, cover letter, all of it, headshot, 2 days. All of it, 2 days. Not the initial response, all of that.
Yeah,
I'll do it in 24 hours.
I'll express it. I'll do it in 24 hours. That's fine. They could use 2 designers, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
Who wants to go next, Jeds?
I'd actually be interested to hear your take, Annie, because I feel like while all of us kind of like have some claim on like the competitive front, you're like kind of the real deal like deck builder out of the bunch here. Like you've made quite a few different decks.
Yeah, I mean, I've made a lot. I've like popularized like a lot of stuff, and then I've also just had like pet decks that are good. But over time, I don't really see myself as a deck builder anymore, just because I don't think like I don't know, the game isn't to a point where I can deck build. But that's like card design, right? So it's different.
Mm-hmm.
But like I don't know, I looked at like trying to be the best player like I could be, right? Like that's kind of what we're talking about, like what we see ourselves as like, as goals and like what you like aim for and like playing card games, because like card games aren't really like that beneficial. But I think like I'm a very legacy type person. Like I like to make a legacy for myself, and I think at the start of like beta that was pretty obvious, and like going up to Rising Tides. But I think when the game's changed and also me like being more of an adult, I think my goals have changed, and I don't really look at legacy anymore, and I focus like I kind of like the community more, and I like kind of instead of me trying to be the best, I really like this idea of like helping others to be the best, right? So that's where my head's at the moment. I'd rather not really care about myself anymore, but like I just want to see people I know like strive up. So that's like where my head's at.
CardGamer, what drives you to compete?
So definitely like I touch on like a lot of what everyone said. Like obviously like integrating into the community is like really cool. It was like something that like when I was originally starting to get into the game, because I think not really Ptash, because Ptash started late, but I think the rest of you guys broke into the scene a bit sooner than I did. So like there was kind of like the sense of community that was kind of existed, but I wasn't fully in that. I felt like I was kind of working towards a little bit, and also like proving myself, because like Santa, this is also my first card game that like I really got into. So I wanted to like prove myself that I'm a capable player and all of that. And I think I've done that to some extent. There's obviously like more that can be done and more I want to do on that front, and more I hopefully will do. But I think to that point, like at this point, what really keeps me going is like being the best player is cool, obviously. Like I think there's different degrees people want that, but like everybody obviously wants to be the best at something. And it'd be cool to do that. But I think what really keeps me going is like one, kind of the legacy thing. I don't need the legacy of being the best player, but one thing that I think would be like really cool to like impact on the game is to have like made a like significant positive impact on the game in some way. The way I would like to do it is like shifting some understanding of the game forward in some way, which is a lot easier said than done, but we can see if that can happen. Some type of legacy that is very cool. And then like Annie was saying, like I really enjoy raising the overall level of competition in the game. Hopefully, I'm the one who can do it first, so I get the benefits first from doing it. But it's really good to just like raise the overall competition. Like it just pushes everyone to be better. Like teaching other people, like then in part like makes you understand things better. Like it's just good to interact with people, and it's like fun to interact with people. Like there's just so many benefits to it. So I'd say like it's a bit of everything, but yeah.
And this
I
game
would
has
say-
a lot higher up it can go too. So to that point, like there's so much more to push up and push the metagame, push how people understand the game. It feels like the game is very young in terms of an understanding of specific lines, specific philosophies of just how to play.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. I was going to say, CardGamer, I think you're well on the road to that goal that you're trying to accomplish, because I think your guides are by far the best out there at the moment.
Yeah, I was also going to
seriously,
say that. Legitimately the best.
Nobody else. Like, at one point, I would say that I put, like, a lot of detail into my own guides, but I haven't written a guide that I'm really happy with in a while. And that's not to say that, well, one, I haven't written a guide in a while. The last one was a Pirate's Guide that I put out a while ago. But, like, when I started writing guides, the mulligan breakdowns that were the standard were, like, you're looking for these cards in aggro matchups. You're looking for these cards in control matchups. And, like, I think I kind of pushed the pace on that a little bit, but then I know when you started writing guides, you came to me and you were like, yeah, Monty, like, I used your guides as like a template for like how I wanted my own to work. And like, you took what I was doing and you took it from here and you brought it up to here. So like, you're definitely well on that road. And like, I think you're doing a phenomenal job of helping people improve and like helping people better understand the game and stuff. So yeah, I think a lot of us kind of came together and had a lot of similar ideals, wanting to help others improve. And
I didn't say that.
you're like the only one who did it, Ptash, but you're the real competitor here, I guess, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with grinding for yourself. I've always wanted to be better for myself as opposed to like for the sake of winning a competition. I don't care about winning. I care about not being bad. And those are very different things in my eyes.
Yeah.
Don't do it for the clout.
Yeah.
I don't really care
I do
about
it for
winning
personal
either.
clout.
I think like I like to look for moments. Like I want to make moments is another thing. I think like a lot of people don't really think of when they're trying to look for something to do in like an environment or like in a space. But I don't know. I really like the idea of making moments. Hashtag RE Suncost kick W.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
I'm
Yeah,
kind of that
nice.
mindset as well. Like, obviously, I would love to be the guy who wins Worlds, but, like, if I'm not the guy winning Worlds, like, I really want it to be, like, one of you guys and to be in your corner and be, like, the guy that's, like, okay, like, let's go at it from this and, like, let's fucking scrim this matchup until we, like, really get it and, like, help you, like, get there.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm not going to do it. And, like, that's kind of, like, where I'm coming from it as well.
I too like moments and getting Unspeakable Horde off the top of my deck. I love moments in this community. It's great. But in all seriousness, because for me it's about like trying to improve as a player. When those things happen and I'm comfortable with my play and what I did, I can lose a game and be very proud and not be salty afterwards. But if, you know, all you want to do is win, you can burn out in that philosophy because, you know, RNG happens in a game and, you know, it's very hard to recover that mental from it. So there's also a sustainability that's just advantageous to having that philosophy, whether you believe it or not.
Definitely.
Yeah, learning mindset's a good thing. Talk about that a lot. It's a
very good thing. I think burnout is like another good topic that we could talk about. Ptash kind of gave us a really nice segue there, because I have definitely burnt the hell out before. Turns out that's what happens when you go from like platinum to masters in a night, and then you don't want to touch the game for the rest of the season. I've done that. It wasn't fun. This season I'm having kind of the opposite. I'm still D1, and like I don't know what the heck is going on. I'm having a hard time trying to play the game. I'm having a hard time like enjoying the game. I think the meta's in a fine spot. I like the decks that are available for me to play, but I just don't know what's wrong. Maybe I've been pushing my content too hard. Maybe I've been doing this, that, the other. I'm not sure, but I definitely think I'm currently experiencing a little bit of burnout. Do you guys have any comments on, like, I'm sure you've all kind of felt a little bit of burnout at one point or another. Do you guys want to share any personal experiences of your own or anything like that?
I think you should start off, Ptash. You've been going super hard this year, and I know it's definitely hit you this season. And I think you have done a really good job of reflecting on it from the bit we've talked about. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely come off like a hot streak of trying my hardest, playing the game as hard as I can. I'm kind of viewing this season as my off season. We got Cup. Let's go.
Cup!
There we go. Sweet.
Amazing.
What's up, guys?
I didn't think it was going to happen.
Sorry, I'll let you guys continue.
Sure. I was talking about, we're starting to talk about Burnout. But yeah, I view this as my off season in a lot of ways. There's not really a great reason for me to play the game right now, being qualified for Worlds, except for just wanting to continue a streak of seasonals in a row, which is purely for myself. So it's hard to stay super motivated to play. But at the same time, like having that recovery period before Worlds, settling down a bit so that I can ramp back up and try my hardest, I think is important. I think there will be a lot of very good players going into Worlds who have been burning hot, who just haven't taken a moment off, and that will be a disadvantage for them. So definitely highly recommend players who are feeling that, who, especially if you're qualified for Worlds, to take your foot off the brakes a little bit. My only goal this season now is just secure a 7-2 spot, ramp back up for seasonals again once they come around the corner after the patch. But besides that, give myself a break and not, take it personally if I am not as high on the ladder as I otherwise would be.
I really like your season off is still secure a 7-2 spot, as if that's like the easiest thing to accomplish in the world.
It is if you're Ptash.
Casually. It's fine.
I mean, we'll talk about TF Nami a little bit later on.
Look, before I started prepping with this guy just like casually playing for fun, just like on work, like at break, going to the bathroom, just hit like rank 1, like top front page, playing Yaya, just like on his phone. Like no care in the world.
Ptash
like,
didn't have a computer to play on until he started like prepping properly. Like I think the thing that actually made him top 4 instead of top 32 was he decided, I need to get a laptop and actually play so I can hand track properly. Because before that, everything was just on his phone. So
I did do 2 seasonal top cuts on phone. That is a thing I did.
Wow.
But I mean, hey, Majin had the little pen too. It's possible.
True.
It's true. I know a number of APAC players that have done that as well. It's tough. I don't know how you guys do it. Like, I really can't focus when I play on my phone.
It's kind of like Rock Lee in Naruto with like the little weights on his legs, and he takes them off and he drops them. That's what propelled me later on in my career.
I think some people are just better on it as well because you don't get like distracted, right? Like I used to be a lot better on my phone just because I could walk around. And like walking like stimulates thinking. So I was like literally just zooming through my house and like trying to hit like, top 10 or something like most of the time. Yeah. So some people are in the boat.
It actually frees you up to take notes better during matches as well. So before every game, I couldn't take screenshots of deck lists. So I'd have to write down all of the deck lists and all the cards, which sounds like a disadvantage, but it also like ingrains in your brain the cards that matter before a match, which is a habit that you could do on a computer, but you might not do, and you're forced to do on mobile.
Yeah,
so.
I have a seasonal notebook where I do that exact same thing, and I've done it since the very first seasonal.
Holy,
because it is literally proven it's proven scientifically that writing something down helps it stick in your brain better.
Yes.
And actually, if you want to take that to the next level, get yourself yellow paper. Why yellow? I don't know, but this is a study. I've read a couple different studies indicating that yellow paper helps you remember things better.
All right.
Sure.
I don't know.
I'd like
it's a tip if you guys
psychology's whack, so like sure.
Yeah. Whatever helps you sleep at night.
Yeah.
Anybody else got some experiences they want to share about Burnout?
Oh, dude, the thing I've played the most in the last few weeks has been either Deja or Zaya or something from TFT. Just trying to grind on that and get those comps up. I think metas in general, every other season tend to shift, right? Like if you look at the way the game has fluctuated over the last year, it went from Ari Kennen to the 3-month slog of like every single possible meta you could imagine from Nard to, Sundisk at that point. And then it shifts again back to combo and then it shifts back to board-based. And I think we're in another cycle. And so for myself, being more of a board-based player, the meta is like just not appealing to me. It's just not that it's bad or anything. So I've just been taking as much time as I can to just play stupid stuff whenever I can and just like jam like whatever as much as I want. And I think it's okay to recognize that as well. The best performances I've ever had have been when I've come off of breaks, and just understanding your own self at all times and ensuring that, you go out and do something else, touch grass. I went and saw a show on Broadway last night instead. Like, it was pretty easy to convince me, whereas normally it's like not, to try and take an hour train into the city to go. But yeah, I think it's important, no matter what, that you just recognize that the game's not always going to be in a state that you like, and that's not necessarily a bad thing either, right? A lot of people will go out and say like, oh, the devs need to balance this, or the devs need to balance this. It's like, relax, take a step back, understand that there's a lot more going on in your own life that you can do, and realize that, hey, the game does fluctuate a lot from season to season. And it's done, if you look at it, probably very much on purpose to stimulate, to make sure that all aspects of the player base are happy with the game at some point in time over every couple month period. So that's my perspective on it.
Yeah, I think that's a great perspective to have.
I think it's really.
I think a lot of people do start to suffer because they think that they have to be 100% into the game all the time. And like you said, like, the game doesn't have to consume your life. Taking breaks is good. Both you and Ptash have been very successful, especially in recent months, in recent seasons. So hearing that perspective of, hey, breaks are good, take some, is something that I am going to take to heart, and I'm sure many of our viewers will as well.
I think if you look at a lot of the top players, when their complaints come in, if you look at how much they've been playing the game over the last 3 years, almost 2.5 years, however long the game's been out, and never really stopped to do anything else, it's pretty obvious where a lot of the complaints come from. It's like, it's not the dev's job to be able to stimulate you with something completely interesting, tailored exactly towards you at any given moment. Obviously, that would be super nice, but that's peak design. If you take a step back and just look at where LOR is as a game and the complexity and how much it's grown over the last year and a half, which is a totally other topic altogether, it's been pretty fascinating to look at. But it's not always, because cards come out in select champions and region combinations, it's not always going to be in the way that you want. A lot of people last meta wouldn't have liked, say, Kai'Sa, for example. But it was very much a development on how Shurima Demacia plays, and it changed a lot of the ways that it goes about out executing its game plan. But if you like spells, and you like playing like Ionia and things like that, it's not going to appeal to you, and it's just going to be super boring. And that's just a fact. For me right now, I see Nami, and I'm just I'd rather just go out and do anything else other than play that. But that's totally fine.
Ionia, cool.
Ionia.
Thank you, Eddie. Very cool.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yeah, that was beautiful, because the current meta, because I feel the exact same way about it, which is crazy to me. Let me say, I thought I was an Ionia simp this whole time. Turns out I actually just like mid-range now.
My brother in Christ, you played Yuumi Pantheon for 3 seasons straight. You are a mid-range player.
But I started
and then you
playing
Kai'Sa to rank 1. My
Dude,
God.
But that's what I'm saying. Originally the game, or the decks I liked were Frail SI and Lee Sin, Zoe, and all of those types of decks. And then recently I've just actually really enjoyed the mid-range path it's taken. And because I didn't like the meta too much, it's kind of a big reason I started streaming, because I still wanted to play the game and really enjoy the game, but I wasn't enjoying ladder, and I'm in a privileged spot where I don't think I have to climb very high at all. I think I'm pretty much locked for worlds. I have 178 points or something, 178 or 176. So I'm pretty much locked on ranked points, so my rank doesn't matter too much. So it's just kind of I'm going to start making content and try and interact with the community more. And that's how I'll enjoy the game right now. At least until the patch. I'm actually really excited for the patch, and I'll probably try hard after that. But right now I haven't been above, I think I've peaked 250 LP or something this season before I just want to play another deck that I think is more fun and just lose it all. And it's just that's fine. I'm not trying to just grind. I'm just actually trying to enjoy the game. And I think that's something that a lot of people miss when they play a lot of competitive games, is when I used to play League of Legends religiously, at one point I hit Diamond 2 or something, or Diamond, it was when there was 5 ranks, so I guess it was Diamond 3. And I got there and I was just wait a second, I hate this. I actually just hated playing the game. So I like quit almost cold turkey and didn't touch the game for like 6 months. Like all of my friends would be playing and I'd just be like, no, I'm actually good. Like it's not fun and I would rather be doing almost anything else. And I think that's something like the like sunk cost fallacy is such a real thing that a lot of people take like having an understanding of what the sunk cost fallacy is, which to put in like layman terms is basically the more time you put into something, the harder it is to leave. Understanding what that is and how it affects you mentally is really important when you're trying to play a game competitively and grindy. Because like if you're not having fun, you're just going to feel like crap after every single session. So just maybe stop playing or find a different way to have fun. Like if you're into Path of Champions, play that. Like it's a fun game mode. Everyone should stop giving it shit.
One thing I will say is that I think one of my competitive advantages is I just feel like I enjoy the game more than other people when I see how they play the game. Like I'm always looking for random cards and a lot of BS in every game I play, different things, new interactions, because that's what brings me joy. And that makes the climb way easier because not only are you learning new things, you're getting better, but you don't burn out, your play is sharper. So in general, I think when you do feel that fun slipping, as Cup was saying right now in this meta, you know, it makes perfect sense to take a break from a meta for that reason. The only reason to not do that is if you're actively trying to push yourself as a player into a different type of archetype you're not used to. I know last season for me, I felt like I didn't have enough types of decks under my belt to be like competent for when Worlds came around. So I pushed myself onto a few different archetypes. But I found fun within those archetypes. So you just have to find the fun wherever it lies.
I remember I tried to do that with Demacia because I was like, okay, I'm going to be the best player ever. And I played Demacia. I was like, nah, I don't want to touch it anymore.
That's a great take. Good take.
I tried to set myself for 2 weeks as well. And I was like, okay, 2 hours in? No, I'm good. Honestly, get me out of here.
Dude, I tried to do that too. I got pretty far. I think I play, like, legitimately every deck except Pantheon. I fucking hate that guy. I refuse. I just refuse.
Pantheon hated me more than I hated Pantheon. So it was no matter what, I tried playing it. And I remember I was playing Manesia and Aegis one game. And I slam a Saga Seeker on 1. I slam a Yuumi on 3. And until turn 9, I don't draw another unit after they vengeance me on 3. And I don't have anything. So normally against darkness, free, right? And I'm just like, nope. Just no, you can't play the Yuumi flat afterwards.
You can absolutely play the Yuumi flat.
Yeah, into a Vagar on 4
hey, man.
on the other side.
I don't know.
Dead. There's no way. That's wrong. It's fine.
I don't know.
I'm not going to get into a debate with the hand that they had and what they were playing on board. It just never made any sense. But you were screwed anyways. So, like, what? With a bunch of concerteds and singles in my hand, I guess my Yumi's going to live.
Bro, Yumi's going to kill the Vagar.
Yeah, what if they DC'd? Think about it. Now your Yumi's growing while they reconnect.
I had to eventually play Yuumi because I was going to burn every card in my hand because I had no chance. I had no choice, right?
That's actually tragic.
I never played Pantheon in a tournament again. I said, screw this.
I don't blame you for that one. Okay. That's a good segue to let us talk about what we got a really good comment on our YouTube video last week about how we define what decks are playable, right? So I think we can all agree there's like a baseline of decks are either in the metagame, on the fringe of the metagame, or like completely unplayable in a metagame. And I think part of what defines playability is the metagame itself, and that's defined by what cards are good and which decks have enough good cards to make the decks like powerful. Powerful is different from playable. Like Kaisa, I think we can all agree is still not, while it's not playable right now, it is still a powerful deck. The nerf to it didn't hit it that much. It can still do its game plan. Its game plan is just bad into everything else that exists, right? So even within this metagame that we have, I lean towards more of a certain style of decks. Santa plays different style of decks. Ptash plays different styles of decks. Cup play, like we all have different decks that we kind of mesh with and what we would say are more viable than what necessarily other people would say. Of course, there is still that overarching structure of Plunder is like really popular right now, so obviously it's very playable. But I think we can all kind of agree, as Kennen is still arguably the best deck in the metagame, even though it's not necessarily seeing a lot of play at the moment. Maybe to different degrees, but I think we can all relatively agree that it's kind of up there at the top. So this commenter was curious to know how we come up with what is playable and how we kind of define that. Does anybody want to kick us off?
So, I guess I'll just start with just saying, like, whenever you're trying to define something like this, it gets really tricky, and, like, it's just a game of a lot of labels and a lot of just, like, we have to come to concrete definitions of what we actually want to talk about beforehand. Not that it's, like, bad to do this and a waste of time. It's just, like, if you don't lay out this foundation, it kind of is a waste of time. And I think once you do this, you can have a good discussion. But I think, so first of all, when you're talking about this, like, playable versus not playable, I think we first have to distinguish if we want to talk about in a ladder setting or a tournament setting. And then you all then have to distinguish, like, if you're talking about a tournament setting, how big of a tournament setting are we talking about? Because, like, these are all, like, factors that filter into, like, the likelihood of, like, seeing certain decks, just, like, how, like, wide the field is. Just, like, all of these factors can affect, like, deck selection and what's playable. And then I think another thing that ends up having to be discussed is, like, how much of the meta is built on what should actually be played right now versus what people want to be playing and people's perception of what is actually good. And I think I brought this up before, and it's just such a great example of this, but, like, look at Worlds meta, and then I don't think there was any patches that season that were significant by the time Seasonals came, and then look at Seasonals meta. It's the same exact patch. People had more time to figure things out, people's perceptions change, and the meta is so different. So yeah. But I think once we lay out these things out, it's good.
Oh, sorry, card game.
No, you're good.
Taking a step back even farther than that, I think that's a really good definition for a, like, competitive player or someone who's in Masters. When I think of playable, the first thing I ask myself is, like, what's your goal? Like, what do you mean by playable? Like, do you want a 40% win rate? Are you happy with that? Are you happy with a 45% win rate? 50? Like, where do we go with that? And what really defines that? Are you playing in platinum? Are you playing in diamond? Are you playing in silver? Or are you just going on casual and playing in normals, right? If my brother asks me what's playable and he's playing in normals, I say, go play deep, go play thralls, go play whatever you want. You're a good enough player that you can play those and have fun and then just surrender to every deck that you don't want to play against. It's literally what he does, like, half the time, right? To give a perspective from casual. He's hit Masters before, but now he's like an iron because he just, like, doesn't care. So when I think of playable, that's what I think of first is, like, hey, how much do I care about winning? And then, okay, what do I care? If I care about winning, then I go into everything that CardGamer kind of just outlined there. But for me, I'm at 0 LP and I couldn't give a damn what my LP is. Everything is playable right now. I can play whatever I want because my win rate doesn't really matter. I think we were, like, practicing for duos on Friday with Ptash, and I saw a deck and the opponent was playing, and I was like, he's like, no, don't FF. I'm like, no, there's no point. I was like, there's just literally none. We're just going to surrender and we're going to go next.
Yeah. One thing I will say on this topic is that outside of a metagame, if you try to be objective, I think you can assess just the general power level of a deck. Like, what the things it can do. Is it doing something fair, but really consistently and really well? Is it doing something unfair, but a little bit inconsistently? When you assess that, then when a specific metagame hits, you can react to that metagame and try to bring that deck in. So that's just, like, trying to understand its power level. And then within that is the variance around it, right? And I kind of alluded to that, but how well it does it and how often it does it. And when you take those two things into account, plus the metagame, that's when you know the general power level of a deck at a specific time. And that's constantly changing. It's in constant flux. And I think from 1 week to the next within a patch, as we've said, it will change based on those things.
Yeah, I think it's an extremely complicated definition that can basically be boiled down to if like you're listening to this podcast and we are like talking about what we're climbing ladder with, and we say like this deck is playable or not playable, it basically means, do we think we can climb with this deck, or is it like more work than it's worth to actually have a positive win rate with it? And then if you're looking at tournament settings, playable versus unplayable is basically, does this deck fit in a lineup that does something in this metagame, or does it not? Yeah. And it can like very, like, that's like a very, very dumbed down definition, but just for like listening sake to understand what that means, it can be a very powerful deck that is just very, very ill positioned right now. So like, even like if we're in a Pirates meta, if the whole meta was FTR and like other frail SI control decks and stuff like that, like Pirates suddenly isn't playable, even though it's a very powerful deck. I
think a basic player, literally just go look at ladder win rates.
Honestly,
and it will tell you what's playable and what's not. And everything else that anyone else tells you is their own personal bias and their perspective. As many times as CardGamer and anyone to tell me GE Shellfolk is a playable deck and it has stats. Average player, please go look. It's 45%. If you want to be doing this, you are going to have to be gigabraining it, and it is unplayable.
Right. It's 45% in a sermon meta, I'll have you know. Well, imagine when sermon's gone. Just saying.
Ashnox will be so good when sermon's gone too, right?
Dude, and Ashnox, like, it's a balance patch, so you know we're getting more Ashnox buffs. I'm just saying.
So, I think, like, when I was deck building a lot, I kind of categorized this as like, you know, trying to find like something powerful would be like consistently powerful, like Ptash said. And then if you find something like a exploitable interaction is also really strong. But the main like thing that makes something good in the meta is if it fits a meta niche. And that's kind of what we're saying right now. Like with the whole, you know, Shellfolk isn't good because like Sermon's a card and you just can't play it. If you have certain things kind of in the meta that go against that power level when it can't fit that niche, that means even though the power level is good, that whole deck's not going to work. And it's just like, that should be how it looks. You should look at it like that most of the time. You know, like if a card's good, it's usually going to be based on like the niche that it'll fit in. So yeah, just like looking. If you want, I'm going to ramble on because I don't know what else to say, but that's like my general consensus.
Yeah.
No, it's good.
I think they're especially like talking about playability range in terms of like ladder versus tournament, and like I kind of made the distinction between like a big tournament and like a smaller tournament is like really big, and I think that's like the most interesting discussion on like where playability branches out, because like on ladder there's like an argument that like playability, especially if you really want to be efficient, is like 3 to 5 decks a lot of the time. Like you don't really have a lot of options if you really want to be climbing, especially with like a solid win rate at Masters, to be like consistently gaining LP and going for like a 7-2 type spot. Whereas in a big tournament, your options, like a seasonals open rounds, like your options widen up quite a bit. But you still are a bit limited. There are definitely some decks that are reasonable decks, but are not the most powerful, or they're a little bit inconsistent, like Ptash was mentioning. And it just makes them a little bit questionable to bring if they're not guaranteed, or they're less likely to hit the matchups you want them to hit. And that's going to happen a lot more in these bigger type tournaments where it's a lot harder to predict such a wide field. And then once you get to really small tournaments, I think it's really interesting because you can start bringing like almost any pile of cards if it's well built and has a purpose and you have a good read. And I think not Aegis, but Runeterra Academy, the first season of it, like pre-Aegis, I think the team I was on, TLS, we did a really good job of this. We brought a bunch of different decks that people kind of disregarded and didn't think were good for whatever reason. People claimed they were inconsistent. They just like weren't high power level decks. And we brought them into the right fields, and they absolutely popped off. These are decks like Peak, like Poros, like Lurk, and these decks all had like close to 100% win rates for us. Like, just very good because we brought them when they were good calls.
Akato hates it, CardGamer brought it. That's the
Yes, sir.
general mentality.
Yes, sir.
You got to win the mental warfare as well, right?
You know I brought so much thralls that season too.
Yeah. To give like a more recent example of being able to target like a smaller tournament metagame, the past 2 weeks of Duos tournament, my partner and I topped. The first week I played with Squeeby. The second week I played with Yang. The first week we brought like Nora, Nami, Shellfolk, Aphelios, and Pirates. We kind of looked at Aphelios. Infinite Patrons was actually in my chat the day before while we were prepping. He was like, "What about Aphelios?" Like, I played a little bit of it on ladder. I was like, "Okay, like that's an interesting deck to consider." And then Squeeby and I were sitting down at 2 a.m. from me, talking about our lineup, and I'm going, "We have Pirates. We both have experience playing this Nami deck, so like we're just gonna bring this because we're comfortable on it. These should both beat Ken and Ezreal, kind of. Let's just look for another deck that targets Ken and Ezreal." Well, what stuffs Ken and Ezreal? Fizz. Fizz stuffs Ken and Ezreal because they have no elusive blockers. They have no way to get through it. And then I remembered back to Finny talking in my chat. We were like, okay, let's try Aphelios. And it actually worked out pretty goddamn well for us. I think CardGamer, you were on the receiving end of that one game.
We threw the fuck out of that game. We threw that game, so I do not want to talk about that game. But
we did not play that one.
I will talk about that week, and I will say, Floppy and I, when we were discussing our lineup, we knew we wanted to bring Nami PZ, and we knew we wanted to bring Ezkenin, and we wanted to kind of be good into Ionia. So we actually did consider it this type of deck. But that was a...
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I don't think Squeeby and I played that week particularly well. Duos is a hard format. Like, just as an aside here for a second, playing in a Duos tournament and like having to discuss lines and be on the same page with your partner, if you guys haven't done that a lot, which Squeeby and I have had the benefit of doing a lot because we hang out on stream together all the time, so it was very natural for us. But if that's not something you've done consistently, it's very, very different. Like, yeah, I'm sure you two, Ptash and Cup, you guys were saying you were prepping for this week. Like, how did you feel about that prep? I'm segueing us like without finishing the topic, but I don't really care.
Take it away, Cup. Go for it.
Oh man, Ptash is a bozo. What can I say?
He's not wrong.
I think there's like certain things where some decks you can think through things really quickly because the lines are there and they're obvious, and there's about 1 to 2 actions every turn. It's the decks where you have about 3 to 5 decision points that you have to make within a 20-second span. So let's use, for example, CardGamer and Floppy playing TF Nami PZ. You play a Sputtering Song Spinner in a Duos, and you have to make the decision to play it first, which takes time because it's a big spell commitment. Then you have 3 spells that show up, and the timer starts ticking. And you got to discuss between each of them and talk through. And then you got to do sequentially as well. And then after you get all 3, you have to make the decision with your partner as to what order you're going to play them in. Should you put them all in the stack? Do you need to actually go into commit? Are you going to actually discard any of these? What if we get focus speed spells? How does that change things? It gets really things that you would normally do on your own that already take time. I can imagine, you know who'd probably be one of the worst Duos players I've ever seen would be someone like Fresh Lobster. That man ropes his timer like no tomorrow on his own action. If he had to talk about that with someone, well, maybe it wouldn't actually be so bad because it's like literally every thought process is what he's going through. But having to say all these things out loud to your partner and to the person who's not seeing it, having to show them this like Nami progress, this is TF's flip progress, this is our opponent's Ezkenin progress at every given moment, and be able to go through back and forth, there's a lot of things that can happen that go on within there. So if you ever do get into a Duos tournament, I think a lot of people go into it just like with friends who they've talked to about the game before. You really want to do some backseating with each other while playing to like get communication down tight so that you can understand what the other person is thinking and what's going through their mind and what's going through yours, and have like dedicated roles as well while you're playing and piloting, who's hand tracking, who's looking at different things that are going on, etc.
Like definitely to add on to that, I've played a handful of duo tournaments now, and I've played with like multiple different players, and I've played with a lot of good players, and I think arguably the weakest player that I've partnered with, and I'm not trying to do my boy dirty, I love this man, Boomer from NA, are probably like because I've played with a lot of really good, like, so like my comparison points are like Gouda and Floppy, right? Which are like legitimately like best on the player type servers. And like Boomer is very good, but like he is not these players. But like the time that went the best was when I played with Boomer, because like me and Boomer really understand each other's strengths and weaknesses. Like our strengths and weaknesses really complement each other's. We understand each other's thought processes, and like we really know how to work together because like we've spent so much time like learning the game and working on the game together. So like even though like if you want to talk like raw skill level, like yeah, it's probably higher when I'm with Floppy or Gouda. Like that doesn't matter because like in duos, it's a lot about becoming more than the sum of your parts.
Yeah. And I don't know if anyone saw, or for those who didn't watch some of the past duos tournaments, a lot of those games were going to time, which makes sense. But in my practice today with Cup, there's just some shortcuts we were trying to communicate and talk to each other about. So instead of, saying, hey, can you show me the level up progress for this champion? I'm just going to say level progress. And then, that way Cup instantly clicks a card, right? Just those little shortcuts so we can talk about the game rather than, saying words that don't need to be said. Little things you wouldn't notice when you're playing alone, but when you're with a partner, you just have to do. And then also just trust, right? There are going to be blocks that we can line up in that both of us are capable enough players to do. We don't have to talk through it all. So whoever's piloting, just having faith and trust in your partner to make those decisions and execute, I think is important so that you can save time for the most important things you need to say.
Yeah.
Also,
I think
I would something not talked about. I'd actually think carefully about who has the controls.
Yeah.
I've only played in one duo tournament, and I was the only option because Phansora was essentially on mobile. But like even just a few days ago, I had CardGamer and Phansora in my stream because CardGamer was teaching me. It's okay, Phansora, because CardGamer was basically teaching me how to play Nami PNZ. Which, by the way, you should write a guide about that because I still want to learn the deck, and I'm still terrible at it.
If it doesn't get nerfed, we'll see.
But there was
Hexagoner.
There was a point where I
don't think
actually just had to completely shut off both of what CardGamer and Phansora were playing and just like APM out my blocks because they were taking too long to discuss it through, and I was just like, I'm just doing this. This is the right play, right? And then you can like ask them after, and then they can flame you. But like, if you're gonna take too long, I'm gonna make the decision. And it's something that I don't hear anyone talk about, but I think it's actually really important.
One thing
you want to talk about,
I always like to do, and this is just in my solo play, and I think it extends really well to duos, is, and it ends up being problematic when I tilt, but I try my best to not tilt, especially in tournament. I tend to do an alright job of it, but like I always try and figure out like what is my best play like from the jump. Like I always like to have like one play like ready to go that I can just like jam out. Not that I like to do it. It's like actually really bad to just like jam the play out most of the time. But like I think it's really good to have this initial idea so like you can then spend the rest of the time thinking, and if you get jammed up between two decisions, you have this like, okay, I'm just jamming this. Like I said at one point this was good. It had some logic. Like it worked with my game plan up until this point because like I've essentially been doing this every turn and adjusting, so like I can just jam this, and I think that works well for a duo tournament where like, okay, like I like this, like let's talk through our other options, but like we're going with this for the moment. Like one rope like it hits the fan, because like there's a game in a duo tournament like Gouda and I lost because we roped out a lurk predict on like Pike versus Rek'Sai and it autoed the wrong champion. Yeah.
I think that's a good extension to another topic that not enough players think about their turns on their opponent's actions. They just turn their brain off and they're like, oh, okay, it's their turn. I'll just chill. And then it's like, it comes back to your action. You're like, oh, wait, what do I do now? If you're not like actively thinking about those things as you go through, you're kind of inting yourself because you're losing out on half the game time that you actually have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also,
what I will say is, go ahead, Santa.
Oh, I just want to add, if you're trying to get your friends into card games and they keep telling you, I don't like playing it because it's really boring, tell them to start using their opponent's actions to think. Because that's like actually something that makes the game so much more engaging, and I've managed to convince people to like take that time. Like there's like thought there. The game's like not on pause because it's your opponent's turn. It's just I just want a bigger player base.
Yeah.
Are you telling me it's not cheating? like I can actually think on my opponent's turn. Like that isn't cheating.
No, it's
I thought
allowed.
it was like
That's you-
chess.
It's
Yeah,
Oh, I
that's
thought
included.
it was like chess. Okay, my bad. I just thought it was like chess.
Let's be
thing.
honest, some players need to realize that they can think on their own turn as well.
True.
Right? I've seen people
It's
play the game
actually
so
true.
fast.
That's why I said it's good if I don't tilt, because like when I'm on
Yeah.
ladder and I start tilting, like it's just every turn as soon as it's my action, I'm just playing out a card, and then I'm like, oh
Yes.
god, I have to stop. But I'm like, I lost LP, I have to queue again, and it's just
Yeah.
it's all downhill.
People message me sometimes saying that I will rope on ladder, when in reality it's like I'm just thinking through every single line I have in this position, and when you're going for a 7-2 spot, every single win percentage you can get up saves you hours and hours of time. So like even talking out loud to yourself, thinking through all the lines, you'd be surprised how many little things, even if you're a great player, you can miss by just not taking the time alone. That's when you're playing the game alone, though. When you're in duos and you're talking to another person, they're your backup. You can't really do that as much.
Also,
but alone, definitely do it.
The feeling of immediately missing a play, like recognizing a play you missed immediately after snap passing priority, is like the worst feeling in the world. Like I had an
Yes.
opponent today playing Kennen Ezreal. I killed their first Kennen. They doubled out their other two Kennens, and I had two Ziggs in hand, and they tapped out of mana, so I could have played Ziggs plus Bouncing Bomb to kill all three of their Kennens, and I just like passed the line because I just like didn't see it, and I was like hardly paying attention. I like clicked end turn and was like, God, that would have been so good.
Yeah. Also, you can think about future turns too, right? Like, what are the top decks I need? Where am I going to be on turn 5 if it's like turn 1, right? Mapping those turns out too are things you can think about on your turn more than just the current lines you have right now.
Yeah, you read my mind on that, Ptash. I think one thing that when like there's a separation point. It's like once you hit masters on like, okay, am I 50% masters player? Am I 55? Am I 60? Am I 65? Or have I reached that point where I can get like 70 when I'm going all the way, like going super hard? And I think some of the things that we're talking about right now are some of those things that are like the escalators that get you to those points. Because I still remember very specifically last year before I picked up Scion, when I was like between a 50 to 55, and then what actually happened between the 55 to make that jump to 60 to 65, and those mapping out of those turns and knowing what does every turn of this game look like if my game plan goes according to plan, and what happens if it doesn't, and like what are the top decks and how does that change that, and how does my opponent's game plan change what I do. And once you start mapping those things out, you can almost play Runeterra in your head without the other opponent, because you start seeing things and you map things out, and it changes everything, and it just becomes like one big diagram and choose your own adventure.
I want to add really quickly, because that is like very important. But like the line I missed where I could have double played Ziggs to kill the Kennens is because I already had a plan in my mind that was, I'm going to play this Kennen. This Kennen's going to get killed because they have the answer to it. So then I have a second Kennen to follow it, or a second, not Kennen, Ziggs. I have a second Ziggs to follow it up. And then I'm going to use that Ziggs to like push through for lethal. But because I'd already counted so many steps ahead, I like forgot to pay attention to what they were doing. And sometimes you will literally, like, your opponent will make a misplay and you just assume they won't. And you will like pass too quickly or something like that. It doesn't happen too much in like tournaments, but in like on ladder, a lot of the time I'm just thinking like a little too far ahead and I'm not paying attention to what's actually happening in front of me. And I'll miss really obvious lines that could like blow out a game.
I was going to say it's very important while doing this to continue staying flexible in your game plan as you're going through it. The same thing happened to Yang and I last Friday, and I noticed it when I was watching back the stream. Our last game against Max and Panda, we're at 1-1. Max and Panda made a third Lee Sin out of the Akshan landmark. And we were on the game plan. We have this mini-morph in hand. We've been holding it all game. We're going to mini-morph the Lee on site. That mini-morph cost us the game. We had a glimpse in hand. We could have denied the Lee spell. They'd already played both their Absolvers. There was no way of giving that Lee further overwhelm. And the Lee wasn't killing us itself. The rest of their board was 2 overwhelm units now, as Olani and Vekarin, the one that makes the landmark for Akshan.
Vagabond.
Thank you. That one had been buffed up by overwhelm. And we died by exactly 1 HP because of an earlier play that we had made, but had we not been so tunneled on mini-morph this Lee Sin, we would have been able to survive that turn, and continue playing for a couple more. So it is great to think ahead and have this game plan set out, but at the same time, you need to be paying attention to what's in front of you and not focusing only on this. The point of mapping it out ahead is so that way you can take stress off of your brain and take load off of your brain in the moment, so that way when things change, you're able to recognize that adaptation and adjust for it.
Right.
But yeah.
Last thing to add to this conversation is sometimes you have the win basically locked up, and you're no longer thinking about how am I winning the game. You're thinking about how are the ways I could lose from this position. So you can have both those conversations at the same time as you play. And knowing which voice to listen to at what moment is really hard, because sometimes making the line that prevents you from losing is actually the way you lose the game, because now you lost your way to win the game. And sometimes by doing that, you're losing your way to lose. You're like losing more. It's kind of confusing, but when to listen to which voice, you have to constantly switch, and it's a constant battle.
This is just an enormous at all Twitch chats everywhere. Just because I cannot lose this turn doesn't mean I'm winning the next turn, okay?
Right.
Yep. Yep. Okay. I think that's a pretty good place to call it for this week's episode. Does anybody else have any other topics that they want to touch on? Maybe some tips for the ladder, some tips for what to do on patch day. I know we are coming up on a patch next week, so people might be struggling from now until then. Do you guys think it's important to be climbing right now? Do you think people can wait until patch if they're not enjoying the meta? I know we kind of already briefly touched on this, and we all kind of said take a break when you're not enjoying it, but any other final parting words for our viewers and listeners?
One thing that I wouldn't mind touching on a little bit related to the last thing that Cup mentioned was like the benefit of understanding like what is your game plan, what your turn should look like, how things start to look when things don't go your way, how top decks change it, and essentially just like playing Runeterra in your head. I think that's like one of the most underrated skills to have, and I think like it's something that I've always had a very big focus on, and I've always like trained myself to be good at, and I think that's like one of my biggest like benefits as a player, and I feel like it is something that a lot of other people can be doing. They just don't for whatever reason. Maybe it's harder for them, so they haven't, pushed themselves to do it as whatnot, but I don't think it's like an unattainable skill. Like it's just, figuring it out and going through the motions. Like it takes a lot to do it on a lot of decks, but like to do it on one deck, I think it's a really underrated process, and I think it's something people should focus on more.
One huge positive with that is it cuts down time a lot as well. Like if you're used to just visualizing straight away, you don't need to do like actual calculations. You can kind of just figure it out in your head. So if you do kind of have like a visualizing mind and you don't use it as much, I would really recommend kind of just sitting there and like even try and replay games in your head just to work on it, because like later down in the road, you're going to actually figure out that, hey, this like visualization tool that I can kind of tap in sometimes is like really nice. So yeah, I would try and hone into that if you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think the easiest example I can give right now is if someone is playing Pirates, right? Because it's one of those decks where there's a new element added where you have Riptide Sermon in the deck compared to before, right? And before Pirates, you want to just slam everything out on curve as much as possible because you want to put on the pressure, out tempo in the first 4 turns, and then use all your power spike on turns 1 to 4, and then play Decimate on 5, Fervor 6, and like whatever other burn you have. That changed a bit with a lot of the new cards that came out. And when you map out your turn and you're playing against, say, Nasus Kindred, for example, you're so far ahead in that matchup, like you're 60 to 70%, but you can map out a way that you go like, okay, I'm going to play Shell Shocker on 1 and I'm going to bank mana. And then I'm only going to play a 1-drop this turn. And then I'm going to play an MF afterwards so that I have 6 mana banked after. Because now that I have all that, I'm good to go. So they can't actually play Kindred on this turn. But you're planning that out from turn 1, whether you have Riptide Sermon in your hand or not. Because as you can't just play the cards that are in your hand, you have to play the cards that are in your deck. And when you start playing your deck rather than just playing your hand, your opponent doesn't know what your hand looks like. Only you know what your hand looks like. So when that happens on turn 6, if your opponent now has token on turn 4 and they slam that Kindred, they're thinking through the entire time that you have Sermon or that they have some sort of trick up behind it. So when you're planning these things out, you can look at the critical stages at a point in a game from the very start. And whether you have the cards in your hand or not sometimes is not important. That's kind of why LOR is really cool with the mana system in the way that it is, because all of a sudden what you represent is more important than what you actually have to begin with.
Yeah. One other dimension I'll add to this whole conversation is that there's a shortcut I use to think through lines quicker, which is instead of reading the text of a card, I'll think through what it's doing functionally in a moment in a specific board state. So I'll think of a creature as like a decimate instead of as a creature. Or I'll think of a creature as a removal spell because it's blocking, right? And finding ways to look at things and not just as what their text is, but what they're doing, and then thinking about future turns and how we can use this resource in a different way and trying to see how that fits into our overall game plan is very helpful, especially as board states get more and more complicated and more textured.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the simplest and best examples of that was like in like Yordles and Arms, especially like old PZ version, just like understanding like when are your burn spells removing units, so you have your units hit face, and when are they going face to guarantee that damage. Because like there are some times where like your pokey stick, which is like 1 damage if it goes face, is like 5 damage if it clears a unit, because like your Yordles and Arm unit is getting in. And then there's times where like that pokey stick is 1 damage if it goes face, and it's 0 damage if it goes and kills a unit, because they're just like removing your board anyways.
You should see Cup with Flame Chompers and Scion. That man does nasty amounts of damage with a little unit.
Oh, Flame Chompers, Grenadiers. But I think it's an important thing, right? Is what you said, Ptash, where a card represents something. A 0 mana 3/2 in a deck like Scion is important because it progresses your game plan to wanting to end the turn by turn 7 and out-tempoing them. A 0 mana 3/2, say, what is that card? Claws of the Dragon. The one that comes onto the field for free when you play 2 spells in Ionia is like bloody useless half the time because it doesn't actually progress the game plan. You're not being aggressive with it. You have better cards that are able to actually be defensive. So what a card reads and how it performs, they're like totally different things depending on the context of the deck, which kind of comes back to the conversation we had at the beginning, right? What's playable and what's not. It's completely dependent on your own game plan, what's going on, and what's actually powerful in that specific meta.
It's also how you think about the pass button too, right? When you press like the blue button to end round, you're paying for their attack token, which is how I can think about it, right? Would I pay this amount of mana to to basically counter a rally?
Yeah.
And once you start thinking about the blue button as a card like that you can click and it's an option. Oh yeah. There are blue button decimates you can click all the time too with that philosophy.
That and thinking of the attack token like a resource is like so insane. Like when I started thinking of the attack token as a resource, I was like, oh, I can like dangle the attack token over my opponent's head and be like, oh, do you want to spend mana into like my challenger vulnerable board state? I bet you don't. Like it's like really fucking powerful. Like, learning that the game just like expands.
Yeah, we just want to like keep getting incredibly in depth about card game mechanics. Like talking about playing the game as if you have Riptide Sermon, even if you don't. Like bluffing, really valuable. If you are playing against a FTR deck and you're Ionia and you just never tap below 4 mana, even if you don't have deny, they kind of just don't play FTR. Like sometimes they have to. But a lot of the time they can't afford to because if it gets denied, they lose the game. Yeah. So, card games are complicated.
This is actually an interesting point I want to add on to that, and then maybe we should wrap it up. Is if you're trying to do that deny thing, but you can't do it because I have deny, against atrocity, I think this is a good example. Is a lot of times people will hold their atrocity against deny because they don't want to do it. But if you put them in a position where it's they're dying or they have to atrocity you and you're bluffing deny, they're losing anyway. Homie's gonna rip it. Like,
Yeah.
you can't actually try and end the game if you're losing to these cards because like of a bluff you have until you draw the card, which is actually like another really interesting dynamic of the bluff that like is enforced, especially
it's
against
so
something
fun.
like Atro.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
if they
eventually
open
that
pass representing atrocity and you're trying to bluff deny but you don't have it, you just click that pass button so you can draw the deny, because it's like they're gonna rip it that turn if you attack.
It
So
present
like
lethal, yeah.
yeah, so you kind of just have to hold back. And now they know you don't
Yeah.
have deny probably, but
Yeah.
gives you one
You
more
guys
out.
should see CardGamer with 3 mana in the Shurima region. That man will do nasty things with 3 mana
Dude,
with a little 4/2 vulnerable action.
Uh-huh.
I just want to play Sivir again, man. I'm not as based as Spiz.
Sivir
That's all
Auction's
of it.
solid right now.
You say that, but there's one player who wins with that deck. And
Bro,
that is
no,
Spids.
I brought
Yeah, literally.
I brought Spid's
Literally.
Sivir Auction to the Runeterra Life like weekly thing, not the duo thing, and I got top 2 with it. I only lost to what am I in finals, and that was on Kaisa Auction or Kaisa Kane. So like Sivir Auction didn't even get to show up there.
Oh, it lost to Kane, so we know it must be a good deck.
No. My Kaisa Kane
was
lost
playing
twice.
Oh, you're Oh, you play
Yeah,
Kaisa.
I
Okay,
brought
okay.
Kaisa
No,
Kane.
yeah, okay. Wait, but Kaisa Kane got second place in this tournament, so does that mean
Facts.
Sivir
I was about to say,
So,
man,
like-
you just invalidated everything
No.
you just said when you brought that
Everyone
up. I was
can
like,
shit.
God damn.
Dude, Kaisa
Something had to carry
Kaisa
Kane.
Kane is just mono Kaisa, except you get to run
Except
like
worse.
yeah, except slightly worse, but
Oh
a
no,
little
we're ending
better.
on copium. I
a
hate
little
it.
better in aggro. Oh no, don't play it. I'm just saying it's not the worst deck in the world.
The content creator life suits you.
It's
well,
not
Santa.
Leona Jin.
This is like
That
the
was-
Freljord
That
Fizz
was
That was like actually the most insulted I've ever felt. I cannot believe you just said that to me.
Dude, Cup had to get one good rest in if he went on.
Oh
it.
my
You don't
God.
know me well enough to know I literally just flamed nonstop. I've held it back the entire time.
Cup likes me too much to flame on my show.
Oh no, that's
Oh, no, I'm
hilarious.
definitely not. I can't. Monty's too sweet of a soul.
Oh my. One thing I did want to say, and I forgot, and then I remembered it as we were talking about this point. To backpedal a little bit, when you are trying to come up with a way to like think ahead, it helps to focus on only one deck because you know your deck better. And this is something that we've talked about on this show lots and in the past, and I've talked about in my guides lots. If you know your deck, it's easier to understand the lines and how it wants to play into a wider variety of archetypes. You don't necessarily have to pigeonhole this deck versus this deck, although that does help, and sometimes certain matchups need to be played in a very specific way. You can get a bigger general read. And then just to kind of close us out onto this current point, coming back to the deny thing, this is a ladder theory that I've had for a long time. You don't need deny on ladder as often as you think you do because people will respect it or disrespect it the same amount regardless. Whether you have it or not doesn't matter. Whether it's in your deck or not, it doesn't matter unless you're in a meta where you need it to counter another deny, like the current one. People are always going to play into or play around deny the same amount, as long as you choose to represent it at that key moment. And this is something, all this bluffing stuff that we're talking about only works once you've achieved a certain level of play because your opponent needs to be reading into your actions and not just slamming cards of their own. But it is something that you always want to be thinking about if you're trying to improve your gameplay, especially for these big key cards like Deny, like Atro. Those are cards that get read even at lower levels, I feel. But that is definitely a good place for us to call it today. So I want to thank our guests, Eni, Ptash, and Cup for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you gentlemen on. Remember to all our viewers, if you're watching this on YouTube, to like, comment, and subscribe. We do check out the comments, as you guys know. Also, shout out to commenter Dre Bell for giving us that excellent talking point today. Guys, drop comments, because if you do, there's a good chance they'll get brought up. As long as they're good comments, we do respond as often as we can. Respond to some of the bad ones too. We're watching you, Truth Seeker. Be careful, brother. But yeah, that's it from us today. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next week.